All right, so Kim, I'm super excited to have this conversation today, and I've enjoyed all the conversations that we've had here lately about leadership, about authoring a book, about writing about leadership, and your story is quite amazing. Now, you and I have a mutual friend whose name is James. He's actually the reason that I made your acquaintance, and have known him for several years and have been working alongside him through some other contexts. And when I heard about your story and I heard about your history of leadership, I knew I wanted to be able to talk to you today and have you on the show and have other people learn about what it is that you have done and what it is that you're currently doing. So, for those that don't know you, what is sort of your 1 to 2 minute elevator pitch on who Dr. Kim Moore is?
Well, thank you first and foremost, Will, for having me today. I am so excited to be here with you. And so when people ask me, who is Kim Moore? I like to tell them that Kim Moore is a woman who believes in two things that she is very passionate about, and that is education and leadership. And my journey begins when I was a young child, and my grandfather was the first one to tell me I was a leader because he said my cousins listened to me and they did what I asked them to do. I wish I could say that I kept that positive leadership throughout my early career in college, but that wasn't the case. But during my time at college and through some different experiences, I came to realize that I had a choice. I could use my leadership for good or for negative ways. So I learned that lesson through ROTC. So I was in ROTC in college. I joined the military once I graduated. And it was in college where I actually got to have my first real taste of leadership because I was the first female cadet commander of our JROTC Corps and the first African American female cadet commander. I took that experience into my military career where I served for 20 years in the United States Army. Very proud of that experience and had the opportunity to work with America's finest. So I retired from the military after 20 years as a lieutenant colonel. My last assignment was at the Pentagon. My expertise is nuclear, biological, and chemical warfare, weapons of mass destruction, because I am a scientist by degree. And then after that, I felt that God called me to become a teacher. And so after I retired, I became a high school teacher. I taught ninth graders. And then he has called me to move up through the ranks of education to where I'm at currently, which is a superintendent of a large school district in the state of South Carolina.
That is quite a resume, needless to say. So, one of the things that really piques my interest about your story is your military career. And so, you started off, I guess you were commissioned as an officer like right after you finished college, right? So, it's from college to the military. And you mentioned that your last station was at the Pentagon. My dad was in the Army, kind of on and off with active duty for a number of years. His last station was also at the Department of Defense at the Pentagon, so you guys have that in common. But when you started off your military career, what was kind of your first impression? Obviously, you had the ROTC experience, so that was some preparation for what military life and career was going to be like. But what were some of the challenges or obstacles that you specifically faced when you entered into that realm?
Well, Will, I love that question because I was actually commissioned, graduated from college when I was 20 years old. So I was very young compared to my colleagues who were 22 to 24 years old as second lieutenants. And because of my expertise, my field, the branch that I was in, which is the chemical corps, my first duty assignment was actually at Rocky Mountain Arsenal in Aurora, Colorado, so right outside the city of Denver. What made this so unique was this was an Army depot for chemical weapons. And my first job was I was to be the deputy to the executive director of the lab. So we had two laboratories there that tested the purity of the stockpile. The interesting thing is, the gentleman that I was supposed to be overseeing was old enough to be my grandfather and actually had a granddaughter named Kim. And so, what I learned through that experience was to take the advice of people who were more senior to me in experience and not stand just on my position. You know, one of my mentors is a friend of both of ours, and that's John Maxwell. And the first thing that teaches us in his Five Levels of Leadership book is that positional leadership only lasts for about 60 to 90 days. And so I had a choice as a young officer. Would I sit down and listen to this gentleman who had been doing this job for 25 years, starting as an entry chemist and working his way up, or will I walk around saying, I'm the lieutenant, I'm in charge, and do what I have to say? I chose to listen and learn from him. And Mr. Eddie Jones was his name, was one of the best teachers that I had to start my military career. It was truly beneficial for me.
Well, I know there's some leadership circles that talk about sort of the concentricity of directional leading. There is the leading down, for lack of a better term. This is where you're leading the people that are under you. Then there is the horizontal leadership where you're helping lead people that are kind of at your same level, that are more your peers. And then there is obviously leading up, which is when you are subject to, someone else that's in leadership, and they, I guess, would be the ultimate decision makers. But for whatever reason, you're finding yourself having to actually lead them. In other words, the productivity of your team, of your unit, of your company requires that you're constantly having to pull things out of those that are over you. Did you ever have any experiences like that?
I had multiple experiences like that because I typically found myself working at the upper levels of the military, of the Army. And so what I would do is ask questions. I found that by asking a lot of questions, I could then get people to understand and to think about how we might be able to do things a little different. You know, when I was on active duty, it was not as many females in the service. In fact, I tended to be the only woman on the staff for as an officer. And so I had to make sure that I, one, understood what my colleagues were saying, two, reframe things in a way that allowed me to use my voice as a female officer, but to also demonstrate that I had a knowledge level and a skill set that was comparable to everyone else around the table. And so, one of my experiences that I definitely use today in my current position is I was the exercise officer for U.S. Central Command for one of our major joint exercises that we did with all branches of service and our allied officers. And I remember I had to go to D.C. to present the plan, and with me, one of our Marine officers who actually outranked me. I was a lieutenant colonel. No, I was a major, and he was a lieutenant colonel. And we go to the Pentagon, and we're in this large room. At the table, there are general officers and full bird colonels at the table. And I looked at my lieutenant colonel and I said, well, should you sit at the table? He said, no, you are the exercise officer. He said, you sit at that table and you are there representing the sink. So while you have this on your collar, remember it's 4 stars that are sitting there because you represent the sink for Central Command, the commanding officer. He said, I will sit across from you on the other side of the room, and you can just look at me. If you need me to give some detailed information that's very specific, you just look at me and just give me a little nod and then call on me and I will address that. He said, but you are more than capable of doing this. You are the Sinks representative. And so it gave me an opportunity once again to do what you talked about. I'm leading up, but I'm also leading across with my peers, as well as we always think about leadership, meaning I'm leading subordinates. But for leaders, we find ourselves in positions a lot of time where we are asked to lead up and to lead across, as well as leading the subordinates we have the privilege to lead.
And I think this is especially true, or it's becoming more true in the military. I've had the chance to do some consulting and training work for the Army. As a matter of fact, even just this year, and some of the organizational health curriculum that I'm certified in. And what's interesting is for the longest time, and we probably saw this philosophy modeled most in the military, but I see it changing a little bit. And it gets back to what you were talking about with John Maxwell and the 5 levels of leadership, where positional, leadership, only lasts so long. You got to kind of ascend those rungs of the 5 levels ladder. But there's this idea of leadership being authority, and obviously there is some, or there can be some authority that comes with leadership. But since you mentioned, I mean, John Maxwell says leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. Where do you see the distinctions between leadership as authority and those leaders that tend to make the mistake of thinking, oh, because I'm a leader, I have this authority, or it's authority that gives me leadership, versus people that lean into influence who may not even have a position of authority, but that are able to make change and make a difference where they are. What do you think the mindset needs to be for a person to be able to strike the right balance between those two, if that's possible?
Another great question, Will, because as a young officer, authoritative leadership was what I used, right? Because I'm the leader, do what I tell you to do. What I have learned though is distributed leadership is more important. And so we want to make sure, as I talk to my leaders uh, that I've had the privilege to lead, is I can never delegate responsibility. I can delegate authority, and I should do that because as a leader, I want to grow leaders. I don't want to just add leaders because then that's what John calls addition is creating followers. But when you multiply and you grow leaders, then you're expanding your capacity and your ability. I think COVID has taught us that lesson coming out of COVID is that if you want people to work in your organization, people need to feel valued, they need to be respected, but they need to see where they fit in and how they contribute to that. And so empowering people to do the job you have hired them to do and trust them to do it until they demonstrate that they can will help with ensuring that people will stay with you. People have choices now. And there are a plethora of opportunities out there for everyone to participate. Why would they choose to work in my organization versus another organization where they may not make as much money in my organization? Well, it starts with creating a culture and a climate where they feel like they are valued, respected, and trusted to do their job.
Yeah, and in my book, I reference a Gallup finding about job satisfaction. It's really not even job satisfaction. It's employee engagement levels. Which employees are engaged, and again, doesn't mean they're satisfied, but it means they're at least they show up to work and there's some eager anticipation that they can make a difference. Whether that happens every day or at all is a whole other thing. But then you have another group which are they're simply not engaged. That is, um, they just don't have that expectation that what they're doing makes a difference. And then you have another group on that spectrum which are actively disengaged, which means not only are they not engaged, but they're so disengaged that they're looking to undermine those that are not engaged and those that are engaged. And most of the studies that you look at when it comes to employee engagement, when the people, and it's a very high percentage, it's about 67%, it's two-thirds of everyone in the workplace, at least in this country, two-thirds of the people will say that they're in that not engaged. So they're not quite actively disengaged, but they're not really engaged either. Most of the people that answer that they're not engaged, if they were to be honest, they say it's either who they're working for or who they're working with, which that gets down to a leadership problem at the end of the day. One of my favorite John Maxwell books, and it's a fairly recent one, he wrote it about 5 years ago, is The Leader's Greatest Return. And the reason I like it so much is that it's easy for a lot of people to think, and this is getting back to what you said about it's true leaders develop people. Leaders think that they want to create something, they want to make a difference, they want to go first. We hear all these definitions of leadership, but at the end of the day, if leaders aren't creating other leaders, have they actually been leading? And it
No.
sounds like from your perspective, that's not the case. So,
No, I agree with you. They're not leading. Um, the research is very, very clear. And I think about the industry I'm currently in, which is education. We are there for a purpose, and that is to create the best conditions for success for our students. So that means everyone that works in my buildings as a leader should be committed to that. And we work very hard. If you were to look at our core values, they are belonging, learning, continuous improvement, and joy. Notice that we add joy. The reason for that is we want people to come to work and feel like this is a place where I belong, but I enjoy what I do. The re- Here's the thing. People spend more time at work than they do at home with their families. Should that not be a place where you enjoy coming to spend time? And that doesn't mean you enjoy every aspect of your job, because none of us enjoys every aspect of our job. But overall, we understand our purpose and the value that we bring to that job. And so I like to remind people, even when I was a building leader, a high school principal, everyone on my campus has purpose. If they didn't, they wouldn't be there. So everyone, our custodial staff, our nurse, our food service, our transportation specialists, of course, our teachers, our administrators, our office professionals, everybody was a part of the vision for success for our students. And so when I cast a vision, that's what I try to do. I try to create one of those mosaic pictures where you have all of the little tiny pictures. When you get real close, you can see it's a picture of Will, a picture of Kim. But then when you step back, you see a picture of a building, because everyone in that picture is important to the success of students and the organization. It doesn't matter what organization, it's how can everyone see how they fit into the success of the organization. And that's what John is talking about when he says leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less.
when I think about your career evolution, again, not just going from the military to education, but also within education, you ran the full spectrum from teacher to principal to superintendent. And I kind of like to zero in on really all three of those, but just kind of one at a time. Uh, as a teacher, obviously, you're working directly with students. You're working for principals, administrators, school boards, etc. The question is, when it comes to leading students, what would be your number one leadership lesson that you took away from that teacher phase of your education career?
I would say to build relationships. That is the key to success. I was a high school teacher, a high school assistant principal, and a high school principal. I was a principal supervisor of elementary, middle, high, and our technical college. And doesn't matter what level it is, it's about building relationships with your students. They are no different than us as adults in that they want to be valued and respected. They want to feel like they belong. And so I'm not their friend, but I am their teacher who cares about them as individuals. And that, I would say, was key to my success in helping me to transition. Um, Classroom is not the military. They don't do what I tell them to do like my soldiers did, right? Because they had to. So I had to figure out other ways to engage them. And I found that by building a relationship where they knew that I cared about them, I was committed to their success. And the purpose of them being there was to prepare them for life beyond school and to
Mm.
set them up for success.
And when you were a principal, obviously, part of your job is going to be to help develop, or at least, at the very least, supervise the teachers that are at your school. My question to you is, because again, you were able to sit in that seat and you were able to work with, lots of teachers. The question is, was there one common, or I should say most common, leadership deficit that the average teacher had that you found yourself addressing or helping them develop, generally speaking?
It would once again go back to relationships because what I found is, especially at the high school level, teachers at the high school level, when I was a teacher, I loved teaching science. To me, science was the most important subject that a student could take because I taught it, I was a scientist, I love science. But I wanted all of my teachers to understand whether a student loves science or math or English or social studies or a foreign language or course or whatever course they were taking. How do you connect with that student so the student understands why they need to learn this? How will this help them in the future? And how to better support them in that process. And so our teachers know how to teach students. They are trained in that area, even not non-traditional teachers like myself who did not go to college to be a teacher but is alternatively certified. We receive a lot of training on pedagogy, which is how to teach students. But you have to start with the fact that this is a person. It's a person that may be a little smaller than you, or in my case at high school, taller than you. But it's building a relationship so students understood why they're doing what they're doing and how it helps them be successful and that you care about them. Everybody wants to know that they are valued and respected. Students want teachers to care about them as people, not just a body sitting in the seat. And I have to say I was blessed to work with phenomenal teachers who took care of our students. I worked at a very high need school where our students had a very high poverty rate. And our teachers put in extra time, extra out, resources to ensure that we gave our students every opportunity to successfully graduate from high school with their diploma because my philosophy was the diploma is the key to unlock the gate of opportunity. So therefore, for our students, we have to do everything that we can do to help that student get across the line. And they did that. So I would say to every teacher and every middle level manager, because teachers are that middle level manager, it's about building relationships with people.
Mm. And how important do you think communication is in that relationship building process?
It's critical. You have to take time to get to know people. And so, a lot of times as leaders, we want everybody to know who we are. I find that if I take time to get to know Will first, get Will to understand I am interested in him, then Will is more inclined to extend me grace when I mess up as a leader because I do make mistakes. Will is also willing to go the extra mile for me because one, Will knows why he's important in this organization, but also that I care about him as a person and I want what's best for him and for him to be successful. It's not about me as the leader, it's about you. And that's another, I know we're talking a lot about John, but his book on, effective communication, it's critical to that. That's the
Mm.
foundation of it is to help other people. And that's why one of my favorite quotes is from, Zig Ziglar when he said, if you help other people get what they want, they will be happy to help you be successful in what you want.
Yeah, and I think this is what I'm about to say is probably a paraphrase of something John said, if not an actual direct quote, but it's something like this. The main difference between communication and effective communication is connection.
Yes.
What role have you seen connection play in helping leaders communicate better?
It is the foundation of effective communication. Because what it does is when I'm connected to you, I have built trust with you. And when you have trust, then you are willing to extend the benefit of the doubt. You are willing to go the extra mile. You're willing to do something that may be not in your job description, but you know it needs to get done. because you have trust that it's something important that we will need to do and that will benefit the organization. And so if you don't communicate effectively, then what happens is you leave room for doubt with people. And when people doubt you as a leader, they're going to do one of two things. They're going to either not do anything because they're afraid that if they make a mistake, it's going to be bad, or they're going to go find someone else who they do think knows what they're doing, or they may not do anything at all. So it's really three and not two, but it's that trust. So if you don't connect with people, then you don't have anything in the bank for when those difficult times come.
That's excellent. You have something big that's coming up on Saturday, October 5th. Something that you have literally birthed is going to be released, and it's a new book. And tell me a little bit about your new book.
So I am so excited about this book because it is l- learning lessons that I have painfully learned over the course of my career. And I've been very blessed, Will, to have two very successful careers. And so I want to share those lessons that I've learned and pass them on to women in particular. Although my new book that will be coming out is applicable to any leader, it's primarily geared toward women. And the reason for it is um, women tend to be very different in the workplace than men. And so I want to equip women to be successful in the workplace and to help them reach the level of success that each of them wants. And whatever that level is, I want to set them up for success. So my book, and I actually have a mock-up of it.
Oh,
I'll show
nice.
you. It is called You're in the Chair, in the Leadership Chair. Now what? Because we can get into that chair. How do we set ourselves up for success once we're in the chair? So it is strategies for women in leadership to create the conditions for their success and maybe not make some of the mistakes that I made, learn from my mistakes, and do a better job. So it's my way of having significance. And I like that term. John talks a lot about it. It's not just about success, because I've been successful. I am successful. But I want to have significance by pouring into others and helping them grow and be the best leaders that they can be for the people they have the privilege to lead. Because leadership is a privilege, it is not a right. And just because we get a title does not mean we are a leader. We're a positional leader if that's all that we ever use, and it will only go so far.
Yeah. And I'll have to, so I had a chance to look at some of the book already. And I would say that in addition, because you're right, it's women, every woman who either has a leadership position or wants to get into a leadership position or has just found herself in a leadership position needs to read this book because it's the shortcuts, it's the roadmap for how to really lead like you're supposed to lead like you've never led before. And the other thing I noticed, though, because of some of the stories and the tips that you share, because I think there are some leaders, women and men, that can identify with some of your stories about, hey, I found myself leading someone that was 40 or 50 years older than me. And there's that awkwardness there, brand new to the workforce, brand new leader, have people reporting to me. What's the right move? And you shared, on this podcast as well as in the book, the perfect way to approach that situation. One of the other things too, you and I both know about Tim Elmore's work, Tim Elmore is the founder of Growing Leaders. And about 2 or so years ago, he released a book called A New Kind of Diversity, and it's all about generational diversity in the workplace. And so he really breaks down the various generations that are alive and then the 4 to 5 generations, really only four, that are currently present in the workplace. So you've got, your Gen Z, millennial, um, Gen X, and then baby boomers. A lot of baby boomers are retired, but then probably about a quarter to a half are still in the workforce. And if there's something that I have noticed, and I think Tim has noticed this as well, when you look at the harmony or maybe even disharmony between different generations at work, it's different, right? It's like, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, Generation X, there were a lot more baby boomers 15, 20 years ago in the workplace. There were a lot of Gen Xers. They got along a certain way or didn't get along a certain way. And then with Gen Xers and millennials, Gen Xers coached or developed a lot of millennials, 10, 15 years ago, and now they're definitely coming of age. And then of course Gen Z is a whole other topic. But the thing that I have noticed is because generationally there are more millennials, a lot more millennials than there are Gen Xers. You have the millennials are the most represented generation in the workforce. There's more millennials than any other generation, and it's they're I won't say replacing, but they're starting to butt up against a much smaller generation, Gen Xers. And myself, I'm a Gen Xer. Because I worked with baby boomers most of my career, I probably identify more with some of the baby boomer habits and approaches to work. But the other thing that I've noticed is that in corporate America, especially, although this may be true in other sectors, could be true in military, nonprofit, et cetera, government. Um, Millennials, you're finding not just that there are more millennials in the workforce, but when it comes to leadership roles, I'm finding millennials more and more in middle management roles. Now, that's probably true even of education with teachers. You probably have a lot of millennial teachers, right? But there are some things that I think Gen Xers react to when they find themselves at the table with a millennial, a younger millennial especially, not necessarily one that's like 41, but maybe one that's like 30, that has um, positional authority or decision rights on certain things. There's sort of a, hey, wait a minute, I have 15 years more experience than you. Like, why are you making that decision? I can see a lot of that happening. And so the next book that I'm going to write, it'll be out next year, is called Millennials in Charge. And I'm co-writing it with a not just millennial, but a younger millennial, one that's almost to the Gen Z generation. And it's all about addressing not just millennials in those middle management and leadership roles, but then also how do Gen Xers, because pretty soon Gen Xers will be the new baby boomers when you think about it, as the baby boomers start to completely retire. But how is it that Gen Xers can change their approach from feeling like they compete with these new millennial leaders to, coaching them on how they can coach and develop them, even if they have a more sideways or horizontal relationship when it comes to roles versus being over them? Because I think most Gen Xers who are in leadership positions over millennials, oh, they have no problem with seeing themselves as potential leadership development coaches of those millennials. But suddenly, when they don't find themselves over them, it gets to be really awkward. What have you found in the way of and again, you shared some personal stories from very early on in your career, but what have you found even recently when it comes to generational diversity, not just in the workplace, but how it affects who's leading and who thinks they're leading, and how the people that are now being supplanted as
Yeah.
leaders, how they take that, how they
Oh,
interact with
Will,
these up and comers?
that is, we could spend 3 or 4 hours on that topic. First off, Tim's book is phenomenal. And um, in my book, I will be recommending a list of books that everyone should have. And I would say that's one of those books that you should have in your professional library, because we do have four generations in the workplace. And because I'm in education, we we are actually dealing with five, because we get to educate Generation Alpha, right? And our alphas are
Hmm.
actually our high school leaders. When you think about government, honor government society, presidents of the classes, and so on and so forth. And so we are dealing with that struggle as you just outlined. I'm at the tail end of baby boomers, but I tend to probably be more of an Xer, because I spent my years growing up and working closely with Xers. And I sense that frustration sometimes with them when they're talking to millennials. But I'm very proud to say I am the parent of millennials. And so I have lots of conversations with my millennial children about how they should interact in the workplace. And several of my children are actually in leadership positions. One is actually in not a senior executive level, but definitely top of the middle management level. And so, what I do and how what I do with my leaders that I have the privilege to lead, and even with my children, is I coach them. Because one of the things I have found with working with millennials is they want feedback. They want to be coached. And so if you coach them versus talking and directing them, they are more receptive. And for anyone that is in that position, I'd say read The 360-Degree Leader by John Maxwell, because in that he talks about leading up, leading across, as well as leading down. But if you start asking questions and you get them to start thinking through the process, then they're more inclined to receive the information that you want to give them. So if you are a Gen Xer and you're working for a if you are, yeah, X and you're working for a Gen Z or millennial, then coach and just ask questions. I appreciate, Will, you bringing this issue to the table. I'm wondering, as I'm trying to clarify in my mind what it is that you're asking me to do and how you want me to do it. Do you mind if I ask you a few questions? And then you ask those couple of questions. Have you considered, what is it that you want? Bum, 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 bum. All right. What's the goal that we're trying to achieve? So could we possibly look at maybe making some shifts here so that we reach a broader audience if it's something that we're going to be marketing? What about if we look at some other approaches that may supplement this? Without saying this is not going to work. I've done this before, and that's what we tend to do as as the Xers or baby boomers is like, I've done that. It's not going to work. And I did it 20 years ago. Let me just tell you the problems that you're going to have. No, ask questions. Or when you put together the work that you're going to submit, these are some things I would recommend that we add to the program so that the millennial begins to see how much value you bring to the table. And, in his book, what Tim talks about is those habitudes of creating a bridge, right? So the older person is talking to the younger person to say, hey, I was trying to do this thing on my phone. Would you help me out with it? Or could you help me do this or that? And then the younger person is sitting down and mentoring, a reverse mentorship of helping me understand, as a millennial, I might want to work on that. And that, for example, we use different platforms for communication. Why? Because I have some people who want an email. I have some people who prefer a text. I have some people who still want good old-fashioned paper. And because of the field I'm in, sometimes I'm required to mail a letter to the house as evidence that we have contacted the parent. So we just try to use multiple ways to communicate. But what I tell my leaders is, listen, if you have millennials, which most of our all of our young teachers are millennials, some may even be Gen Y. If text works best for them, text. And you can also send an email for those older team members who prefer to read the email. There's multiple ways to do it. Your job as the communicator is to communicate. And if your audience hasn't received it, it's not the audience's fault. It's your fault as the communicator.
What would you say is the biggest leadership lesson that you've either learned, experienced, or yourself demonstrated in the
Over
last year?
communicate. That's the lesson that I would say, especially as you climb higher on that ladder, to over communicate. And to when you over communicate, take in consideration that just because you understand the message doesn't mean that everyone in the audience understands the message. And so therefore you have to go back out and check with people. And so, when I visit schools, I will talk to our custodial staff. I talk to our food service uh, ladies and gentlemen, I talk to our teachers as well as the administrators who I talk to quite frequently because I want to understand from them how did this message come across, right? So, because that's my responsibility as the communicator to communicate in ways that will be clear to everyone. So, over communicate and remember clarity is kindness. Uh, I learned that from Dr. Brene Brown in her book, Dare to Lead. Clarity is kindness. Because when you're not clear, you leave people to fill in the gaps, and that's not a good thing.
If you want to hold up the book one more time, the name of your book is You're in the Leadership Chair, Now What? And it is available on Amazon. It's available for pre order prior to its release date of October 5th. If it's after October 5th, obviously you can order it. Hopefully, you have Prime and can get 2 day shipping if you do that. And also, leadershipchair.com is another place that people can go and click buy now and end up getting the book. So, Dr. Kim Moore, thank you so much for today. This was an enlightening experience, and it's just nice to be able to geek out with someone else on John Maxwell and John
Well,
Maxwellisms.
thank you, Will.
It's always fun. So,
There are books and there are people that mentor you through their books. And John is one of those people. And there's lots of other, I mean, if I showed you my library, it's full of books by many different great authors. But I truly appreciate John because one, I am a founding member of his coaching team. And so Maxwell Leadership. And I did that because when I was looking at how do I improve my leadership, someone gave me the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, which I consider to be the foundation, the Bible of leadership. Um, and I have given that book and done book studies on it with every leadership team uh, that I have led. And I'm going to be doing something very similar with my current leadership team because it is the basic principles. And so, yes, we both geek out on John, but I know a lot of other people do because he's a best selling author and leadership guru. So.